Tony McQuail, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Michael.
Listen, I want to begin with the last NDP leaders debate in Vancouver, because it was interesting to note, at least for me, that of all the candidates, you were the only one to say that you're in this race to become prime minister. The others, to be clear, have that aspiration too, but they were talking more about rebuilding the party. You were talking about running in this moment to be prime minister. Do you honestly think that this party, averaging at just about 8% of the polls, has any chance of winning a majority of seats anytime soon?
That depends on what the voters decide to do, and it depends on the vision that we offer them. And the reason I said I'm running to be prime minister is when I first ran in 1980, I wanted Ed Broadbent to be prime minister, and I wanted the New Democrats to govern. They were the only party talking about dealing with high interest rates as a problem that was not going to solve the problem of energy price inflation, and that we needed to go to renewable energy, efficiency, and conservation. I'm running to be prime minister now because for the last 45 years, I've watched our leaders take us down a road of growth, which has been growth in wealth inequality and growth in environmental damage. And we can't keep going down that road. We've got to change direction. Half the people have given up voting. Half the eligible voters don't vote and have given up on politics because the system is not serving them. And half the people who do vote get their vote thrown out on election night because of the way our first past the post systems works, and they get no representation. So we've got broken systems politically, broken systems socially in terms of economic wealth disparity, and a disaster in terms of how we're treating the ecosystem on which all our lives depend. My little cake chart in the back there talks about nature, family and community, then the public sector, then the private sector. And the person who did it, Hazel Henderson, said, you know, the important thing to understand about a cake chart or about a layer cake is that every layer depends on all the layers below it. And we are not serving the family and community layer well in terms of how we're treating people with regard to wealth inequity. And we're certainly not doing a good job of looking after nature, which is what we all depend on.
Okay.
So, you know, I'm running for prime minister because I think we need to change that.
Okay, and to that, your campaign does, the platform at least, it does focus on representation, regeneration, redistribution, and redesign, the 4 R's as you call them. And maybe it's worthwhile to break that up a little bit, beginning first and foremost with redistribution, one of the R's that you highlight, because you do campaign on a wealth tax. And right now, given the economic perils that this country is in, the productivity challenge this country has faced for 30 years, you know, the criticism against that is a wealth tax can discourage investors from investing in this country. What do you say to that?
Bullshit. The reality is that people invest their time and effort in our society all the time. And investors, you know, money is an imaginary thing. We don't realize that, but money is a human creation. And maybe if we were denominating things in calories, which are our real measure, we'd actually have an economy that wasn't so distorted. But yes, maybe investors wouldn't invest, but the people who do the work and the resources that we have are still going to be in Canada. But if the investors aren't going to do that, then maybe that's what we need to do through cooperatives, through government involvement. You know, we got through the Second World War because of heavy government involvement in the economy that produced the resources to win the Second World War. We are losing the war because investors are not investing in the things that people need, and they are creaming off. I would say we've been told that the trickle-down theory is going to make life better for us. That is, make the wealthy wealthier, and it'll trickle down to us. As far as I can see, that actually is the suck out and suck up theory. Suck resources and suck our labor, the value of our labor out of our communities, and suck it up to both the wealthy within Canada and transnational corporations and the wealthy beyond. Mm-hmm. So, you know, from my perspective, it's not working. It hasn't been working for the last 45 years. And don't keep telling me this is how we're going to solve our problems. The kind of growth we've been being told is going to work for us does not. And I look at
let me jump in.
Okay.
Sorry, just because I don't want to lose time here, but let me jump in because, you know, that leads me to another one of your R's, which is redesign. Because you say instead of chasing infinite growth, Canada needs needs to focus on small scale and sustainable projects, and that housing should prioritize affordable and communal living. So I hear that and I wonder, is what you are asking Canadians to do is learn to live with less?
I would say that we learn to live with more quality of life, less consumable products. We've been on the treadmill or the hamster wheel of corporate capitalist consumerism. And when I see that the number of our billionaires has gone up 1,400%, but the number of people on the street seems to have also gone up that way in terms of people sleeping on the street, we've got a big problem. But no, we live a very frugal life, Michael, but it's a very rich life. Rich life in terms of involvement in our community, rich life in terms of our family, rich life in terms of the growing a lot of our own food. Now we have that advantage as being farmers, but we can all be much more embedded in meeting our basic needs and having a really rich life without being on this hamster wheel of debt and growth and got to keep going, got to keep going. Human beings are where we are as a species in terms of having survived because we learned how to care for each other and share with each other. We come into this world absolutely helpless as infants, and because we care for each other, we survive. And because societies have cared for each other and shared with each other, we survived. We need to get back to those values, and we need to stop growing our consumption, both our energy and our resources.
Sorry to interrupt again. So what would you then do in the case of Donald Trump? Because I'm hearing what you're saying, but without a doubt, trade with the United States, with other countries, that has created growth, economic growth, and wealth in this country. I hear you making the counter argument. No, I am listening. I am listening, and I'm hearing what you're saying. It leads me to my next question, though. So, because right now, so much of the political leadership is concerned about how to deal with Donald Trump. How would you then deal with Donald Trump? If what you're saying is that we need to reassess how we live our lives and what we do, how would you deal with Donald Trump, if at all, then?
Well, I would say the strongest way, I thought when it was first announced that there was this great tariff problem is, okay, let's relocalize our economy. Let's use our resources first to meet our needs as a society. Let's not try and keep growing those needs through advertising and promotion. Let's meet our needs with our resources. And in terms of Donald Trump and his, 51st state belligerence, all that sort of stuff. Let's work on developing a nonviolent defense strategy of unarmed civilian defense and work to strengthen our communities all across the country. When Carney talks about nation building and its pipelines, mines, industrial carbon capture, those are planet destroying projects. They're not nation building. I would say if you took the money that they're going to spend on that and the $30 billion or so that we subsidize the oil companies with every year, and we put that into $1 million grants to communities across Canada, just the oil company, $30 billion, would give 30,000 communities $1 million grants.
So you wouldn't you would not concern yourself with trying to renegotiate a CUSMA? You would just throw that out the window?
Negotiating with Donald Trump is like negotiating with somebody who is, we already negotiated with him, and now he says what he negotiated with us in the past is no good.
And I hear that, but would you then just walk away from CUSMA then? Would you say that deal needs to go and we need to recalibrate this country without that type of agreement?
We need to recognize that in this climate with Donald Trump, spending a lot of time on that is just going to be probably a waste of time. And what we need to do is say, okay, now, how do we meet Canadian needs with Canadian resources? How do we buffer ourselves from trade with the United States during this period? And yes, we need to look at what I would call not the idea of competitive advantage, but cooperative advantage in our trade relationship with other countries, so that we build strong, mutually beneficial trade. But right now, like if Donald Trump were my neighbor and we'd had an agreement on equipment sharing and they were starting to behave the way Donald Trump is, I would be very much looking at, okay, how can I work with other neighbors, or and buffer myself by either not needing that piece of equipment, figuring out how to run my operation without that equipment, or how can I look after getting and having control of that equipment within my farm operation.
Okay,
Because Donald Trump is just so unreliable and so quixotic.
let me move on to another topic right now, and I mean this respectfully, but national unity will be a big issue this year. Alberta will hold a referenda in October. Quebec could be headed for another referendum on separation if the Parti Québécois wins the provincial election this year. How are you the man to make the argument for Canada if you are, in Alberta's case, campaigning against oil and gas, and in Quebec's case, can't speak French?
Yep. Well, we have a holistic goal for Canada, and using that as the values to which we try and direct the country. And unfortunately, if it had been in place 45 years ago and we've been working toward it, maybe we wouldn't have these separatist tendencies. But in Alberta, oil and gas is not the friend of the workers. It's what they're currently in and what certainly Danielle Smith wants to keep them addicted to, but it's not the path to their future. And it's not the path that's going to be renewable, regenerative, sustainable for Albertans. I mean, they have some pretty good wind and solar renewable energy potential there as well. And in terms of Quebec, yeah, I'm not going to be somebody who's glib in French, but I think the vision that we articulate in our holistic goal would appeal to rural Quebecois, urban Quebecois. We've got bigger problems than, the root causes of our problems are how we're using too much energy and too many resources and are destroying our life support system and the planet. And that's a bigger issue than either Alberta separation or Quebec separation. But if we don't address those, they're quite right. They may be able to make an argument that they're better off on their own. But those are things we'll have to negotiate and discuss. And I certainly, if either one decides to separate, then we're going to have to figure out how to do that as amicably as possible and with as little damage to the long-standing benefits that having a connected Canada is. But I think the reality is we'll have to face that when we get there. But the other thing that I bring to it as a Quaker is we are a group that has worked for over 400 years on the concept of consensus and trying to find a way forward that all can agree to. And that's sort of in my long-standing approach to negotiations and dealing with people. And it's one that's respectful and recognizes that we have to listen, not just talk with ideas.
Listen, Tony, I only have a minute left here, but I do want to ask you, win or lose, what influence do you hope to have on the New Democratic Party?
Well, I hope it gets us looking at and talking about what to me are the fundamental issues of our time, which are the growing inequality in the way we distribute the resources and wealth that we all help to produce, and the way that we relate to the ecosystem on which we all depend for our lives. And if we don't do that, none of us are going to come out of this looking well. I'm not talking about the New Democrats, I'm talking about Canadian society and global society. There are fundamental changes that we are going to have to do as a species, as people, to stay within the carrying capacity of the planet that we all depend on for life. This globe that we live on is the only spot in the whole universe that we're aware of that has biological life on it. And we are not treating it like the precious, miraculous thing that it is. And unless we do, it's going to tell us to give us the eviction notice because we've cut down its capacity to support my children, my grandchildren, all of the young people in the world. So we need to change our ways, and we've had lots of warnings. They're getting sharper and harsher. And if we don't get smart and stop getting on the corporate capitalist consumer path, we've had colonialism on the planet for 500 years. With a conquest of the planet. Now we've had corporate capitalist consumerism for about 100 years, and we are headed in a really disastrous direction in terms of what we'll have left on this planet.
Tony McQuail, I appreciate the time. Thank you for this.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and I hope that cake chart has some value in terms of people's paradigm of what's critically important.
Thank you. You too. Take care.